Hi, it's Ivy. Come closer for a story about losing the sound you trusted and finding a truer way to be heard. The morning before reopening night, I crossed to my final mark, lifted my chin, and tried to speak. Nothing came except a raw whisper that hurt enough to bend me at the waist. Dana killed the rehearsal cue before Miriam even stood. I made the mistake of trying again. Miriam held up one palm. Not dramatic, not tender, final. She pointed to my water bottle, then to the wings, and said, "No more proving the injury exists." My phone buzzed with the clinic's return call. The doctor repeated what I had already been told. Viral laryngitis, strict professional voice rest, no whispering, hydration, and re-evaluation if the pain worsened. I typed, "Opening cancelled?" and turned the screen toward them. Dana exhaled through her nose. The reopening grant covered repairs only if we completed the scheduled public performance. Cancellation would leave the non-profit responsible for bills it could not comfortably absorb. Opening badly, though, would waste months of volunteer work and ask an audience to trust a story we no longer knew how to tell. Miriam crouched beside the taped floor plan. "We are not replacing you," she said. "We are replacing the assumption that the lead must carry the story through speech." She proposed rebuilding my role around physical storytelling, while an adult ensemble member delivered the few essential transitions off stage. I stared at her hands moving the tape and understood the full title of my disaster. I had lost my voice, and the director meant to rewrite the role around me. I typed, "Is this mercy or a real artistic choice?" Miriam read it twice. "A real choice," she said, "and yours to refuse. We can cancel honestly instead." Dana added that no one would ask me to rehearse through pain. My contract allowed medical withdrawal. The room became very still. I had spent 20 years learning how to enter on a breath. I nodded before fear could turn my neck rigid. We began by stripping every line from the second scene, the one where my character persuaded a town to reopen its abandoned hall. Without dialogue, the blocking looked embarrassingly busy. I pointed, crossed, pleaded, crossed again. Miriam watched from row 6 and finally called, "You are decorating panic. Stand still long enough for us to see the decision." I hated how accurately she had described both the scene and me. Felix found the faded blue silk ribbon in a prop drawer and offered it as a temporary spike mark. It had once marked my position during an earlier tour stop, back when tape refused to stick to a dusty floor. Miriam laid it in a small loop at centre. Impersonal, practical. "Land here," she said, "then do less." I stepped onto the ribbon and let my empty hands carry the argument. The first attempt failed because I performed silence like an emergency. The second failed because I tried to make every thought visible. On the third, Miriam walked onto the stage and copied my opening gesture at half its size. Her shoulders softened, her gaze stayed level. The meaning reached me before the movement ended. "Silence is not empty. It is crowded with choices," she said. I wrote the sentence in my notebook. Dana timed the revised scene. It had been 9 minutes with dialogue. The silent version lasted 4.5. I expected that to feel like amputation. Instead, the scene suddenly had a pulse. My character touched the locked hall door, looked at the waiting town, and placed her own key on the ground. Dana lowered her stopwatch. "I understood more," she said, "which is inconvenient for the old script." Miriam and I replaced speeches with verbs. Invite, resist, conceal, offer, remain. She would slide a card toward me. I would build a gesture phrase without speaking. When I reached for impress, she took the card back. "That is not an action. It is a request for approval." I gave her an offended look. She smiled. "Good, keep that face. It belongs in the argument scene." My laugh came out soundless but real. By noon, we had a movement score. Dana called cue numbers while Miriam shifted cubes to create clean pathways. I discovered that my body knew the story even when my mouth could not escort it. The discovery frightened me. If the performance worked, then the voice I had defended as my central gift might be only one instrument. I typed that thought, deleted it, and showed Miriam a simpler note, again from the top. During the next run, I missed the new pause. Miriam did not interrupt. She raised 2 fingers from the lighting desk, the same shape as the ribbon's loose ends. I stopped, breathed without voicing, and found center. Afterward, she asked whether the signal felt useful or controlling. I typed, useful, also annoyingly elegant. She wrote beneath it, I accept both compliments. The ribbon stopped being only a mark. Felix altered my coral costume for broader movement. He added hidden stretch panels and removed a decorative collar that pressed near my throat. Beauty should not require strangulation, he said, biting off a thread. I gave him a solemn thumbs up. He looked at my phone where I had typed, thank you. You know, your eyebrows are doing excellent diction. I raised one. Exactly, he said, terrifyingly clear. Miriam arrived with the ribbon coiled around her fingers. She wanted it sewn into the costume as a visual guide. I shook my head hard enough to make Felix step back. A fixed guide felt like a brace everyone could see. Miriam accepted the no immediately. Then it stays external, she said. A choice you make, not a correction attached to you. The distinction loosened something behind my ribs. We tested the silent scene from every section of the auditorium. Miriam made me sit in the back row while she walked the path herself. Her movements were efficient, almost severe, until she reached the invisible door and hesitated. That half-second changed the whole scene. I tapped the seat between us and typed, "You understand reluctance." She glanced over. "I have directed 3 budgets and a roof repair. I am intimate with reluctance." I asked why she had not tried physical theatre before. Miriam said she had, badly, in graduate school. I made 12 actors move a staircase for symbolic reasons none of us could explain. I covered my mouth to protect the silent laugh. She added, "A limitation is not a lie unless we pretend it isn't there. This one is here, so we tell the truth with it." I saved that line too. Voice rest turned every pause into a social experiment. On the roof, Miriam did not fill silence for me. She watered basil, handed me the can, and waited while I typed. Most people leaned closer when I could not speak, as if volume and intelligence were cousins. Miriam leaned back enough to give me room. I wrote, "You are unusually good at not rescuing." She replied, "Years of disappointing houseplants." I asked whether she believed we could open. She studied the wet soil rather than me. "I believe we can discover whether opening is honest. That is not the same promise." Her answer should have unsettled me. Instead, it felt safer than optimism. She would not spend volunteers, grant money, or my health to protect her reputation. I looped the ribbon twice around my wrist and offered her the watering can like a truce. Dana built a new safety language for rehearsal. Flat palm meant stop, 2 fingers meant hold, a circle meant reset, and both hands down meant no debate. We practiced until the cues felt automatic. The ensemble would use them during silent passages. Miriam insisted that anyone could call stop, including volunteers. "The safest cue is the one everyone understands," Dana said. I realized the production was becoming more accessible by necessity, not charity. At the end of the session, Miriam flashed the 2-finger hold cue when I reached for my phone. I froze theatrically. She pointed to the ribbon, then to herself, asking without words whether I wanted the signal to remain private between us. I nodded. She touched 2 fingers to her heart, not sentimental, just precise. The ribbon became our quiet shorthand. Center, breathe, choose. I slept better that night than I had all week. The next problem lived beneath the stage. An old, hand-cranked wind effect was supposed to lift the final cream panels, but its belt slipped whenever the crank accelerated. Miriam disconnected the motor and invited me to inspect the mechanism. She did not hand me a wrench. She asked what rhythm the movement needed. I tapped a slow pattern against the floor. Gather, resist, Release. She listened as if my knuckles were speaking. We tested the effect without power. Miriam turned the wheel while I moved beneath the panels. Too fast, and the fabric looked like a trick. Too slow, and it sagged like laundry. I signaled the pulse with my shoulders. She matched it. For one brief run, cloth and body rose together, a visible breath across the stage. Miriam stopped with both hands on the crank. "That," she said, "is worth repairing." Miriam and Dana replaced the cracked belt with a spare from storage. Dana checked the lockout twice. No one rushed because the clock was loud. I watched from a marked safe zone, frustrated by my useless hands, until Miriam asked me to count the rotation visually. I tracked the wheel and raised one finger whenever it drifted. My training in tempo became a diagnostic tool. The wobble appeared every 7th turn. A bent guide pin caused the drift. Miriam straightened it, tested the brake, and asked Dana to call the cue. I marked 7 counts with my fingers. The fabric rose cleanly. Dana looked almost offended by success. "Again," she said. We ran it 6 times before she approved it. Miriam never celebrated until the safety check was complete. Her restraint made my attraction inconveniently specific. Felix helped me translate the repaired effect into costume movement. He shortened one sleeve so my wrist could release the ribbon cleanly. I mimed the new ending between garment racks while he watched over his glasses. "You are flirting with the architecture," he said. I shook my head. He glanced toward the stairwell Miriam had just used. "I did not say which architecture." I threw a spool at his apron. He caught it. Miriam returned with a new prop list and found me practicing the release. The ribbon floated from my hand, caught a draft, and landed across her boot. She bent, lifted it, and waited rather than bringing it to me. I crossed the room and took the other end. For a second, the silk connected us. Felix cleared his throat with theatrical innocence. Miriam said, "Your supervisor is subtle." I typed, "He is unionized against subtlety." We ran the repaired effect in the empty auditorium. The ribbon now traveled from my wrist to the floor, drawing the audience's eye before the panels rose. Miriam shifted the sidelight 2 degrees warmer. The silk changed from faded blue to something almost luminous. I looked toward the booth. She raised 2 fingers. Center, breathe, choose. I held still until the fabric moved around me instead of competing with me. Dana called the scene coherent for the first time. Miriam asked me whether it felt like my work or her solution. I typed, "Both," which scared me more than either answer alone. She read it and sat on the edge of the stage. "Collaboration should leave fingerprints from everyone," she said. "It should not erase who touched it." I wanted to ask who had erased her before. My phone remained dark in my hand. Miriam brought me to the alley cafe after rehearsal, because soup required no conversation. She ordered mine mild without asking whether I was delicate. She had noticed the chili oil made me cough. That was different. I wrote, "Thank you for distinguishing care from panic." She slid the phone back. "I have met panic. It carries 3 clipboards and says it is only being thorough." I looked pointedly toward the theatre. She smiled. "We developed a table system. 1 tap meant yes, 2 meant no, 3 meant I needed time." Miriam never guessed after the 3rd tap. She waited. The habit felt intimate before either of us admitted intimacy existed. I wrote that touring had trained me to answer quickly, smile quickly, recover quickly. She wrote beneath it, "Quick is not the same as true." Her block letters leaned forward like they had somewhere important to be. To keep me from talking, Miriam performed a miniature tragedy with 2 soup spoons and a packet of crackers. 1 spoon represented artistic integrity, the other represented payroll. They dueled until the cracker packet collapsed. My silent laugh shook the table. The server glanced over. Miriam bowed. I typed, "You are a menace." She answered, "Resident set designer. Menace is only the seasonal title. I began wanting more afternoons that required no emergency. The doctor checked in that evening. My pain had eased, but my voice remained unreliable. The instructions stayed the same. Rest, hydrate, avoid whispering, do not test it every hour. I typed the update to Miriam on the roof. She nodded and changed nothing about the plan. No sudden optimism, no disappointed pause. She simply asked whether I wanted tomorrow's rehearsal shortened. I tapped 3 times, considered, then tapped once. I asked what would happen if my voice returned before opening. Miriam said we would evaluate it medically and artistically. Recovery does not obligate you to restore the old version, she said. I typed, even if audiences expect it? She looked toward the theatre roofline. Audiences deserve clarity, not obedience. The answer struck harder than praise. I had spent years confusing expectation with contract and contract with love. Dana and I formalized the ensemble cues. We made each gesture large enough for peripheral vision and distinct enough not to resemble ordinary movement. Hold was 2 fingers. Clear was a sweep down. Need help was one hand touching the opposite wrist. I suggested adding lost place, a flat palm circling once. Dana approved it. My silence was teaching us to build a room where confusion could be admitted quickly. I taught the adult ensemble through demonstration. No speeches, no apologies. We moved through cues until bodies answered before embarrassment could interfere. Miriam stayed at the side, taking notes instead of directing over me. When one transition clogged, she asked permission before offering a change. I nodded. She shifted a cube 6 inches, and the traffic opened. Respect, I learned, could be measured in inches and timing. We created a duet for the argument scene. My character wanted the hall reopened. Miriam stood in for the absent council chair while I built the movement. Each time I pushed, she stepped aside rather than back. The refusal became visible without becoming cruel. On the final count, she offered an open hand. I nearly took it too early. She lifted 2 fingers. I stopped, chose, then crossed the distance. Our palms met only for the length of 1 breath. It was blocking. It was also not only blocking. Miriam released first and asked, "Does that contact belong to the scene?" I typed, "Yes." Then, after a pause, I added, "It also belongs to a conversation we should not have during my contract." She met my eyes. Agreed. Relief and disappointment arrived together, annoyingly well coordinated. The next run gained speed. Gesture cues passed through the ensemble like visible music. My offstage transitions were spoken by an adult cast member in a neutral tone, brief enough to frame rather than replace me. The arrangement worked because it did not pretend my silence was the character's silence. Dana stopped us once for a crowded exit. Miriam solved it by removing furniture. She trusted space more than decoration. Afterward, I asked whether the new version made me replaceable. I typed the word slowly. Miriam did not rush to deny it. "Everyone in theatre is replaceable in function," she said. "No one is replaceable in contribution. Those are different truths." I looked at the ribbon between us. The distinction hurt because it was not flattering. It was better than flattering. It left me human. I wanted to tell her that being needed had always felt safer than being known. My fingers hovered over the phone. Instead, I wrote, "Tomorrow we test the final scene." She read the evasion and let it remain an evasion. "Tomorrow," she agreed. Her restraint did not feel like distance. It felt like a door she refused to force. I tucked the ribbon into my pocket and walked home quietly. The old final scene depended on a speech beneath rising panels. Removing the speech exposed an ugly truth. The reveal had been doing most of the emotional work. Miriam drew a diagonal path from the blue ribbon to the downstage corner. I would begin centered, leave the mark, and invite the ensemble into the space through gesture. Dana warned that the traffic had to remain clear if the effect failed. I tried dragging the ribbon like a boundary, too mournful. I tried lifting it like a banner, too heroic. Miriam said, "What if it is neither wound nor victory? What if it is simply information?" I let the silk hang between my hands, showing the path I had taken. Then I laid one end at center and carried the other outward. The ribbon became a line someone else could choose to cross. Miriam softened the final sidelight, so my face stayed visible without making me look saintly. "You are offering a room, not ascending," she said. I typed, "Thank God, heights are not in my rider." She snorted. We tested the ribbon against the coral costume. Blue and coral looked almost too beautiful together, so she dimmed the saturation. Honest stage language, I learned, included refusing prettiness that lied. Dana drilled the failure version. If the panels jammed, she would stop the cue and call the bypass. I would move downstage, the ensemble would enter by gesture, and no one would stand beneath the rig. We practiced until the alternate route lived in our muscles. I resented spending precious time on failure. Dana read my face. "Prepared is not pessimistic," she said. "It is how we stay kind under pressure." Felix built a hidden pocket for the ribbon, loose enough to reach without looking. He made me retrieve it 20 times. On attempt 11, the silk snagged. He unpicked the seam without blaming my hand. "A costume should forgive adrenaline," he said. I typed, "Can people be tailored that way?" He considered. "Only if they stop pretending seams are character flaws." I stored that line beside Miriam's in my notebook. Miriam timed the new release. 2 counts to find the pocket, 1 to breathe, 3 to extend. I could do it in 4, but she insisted on 6. "Speed is not proof of competence," she said. Felix murmured, "Please embroider that on every rehearsal bag." I gave them both a look. Miriam raised 2 fingers. "Center, breathe, choose." I slowed down, and the ribbon opened cleanly. Rain pressed soft coins against the cafe window. My voice had improved to a faint sound, but the clinic had told me not to use it yet. Miriam ordered soup and placed my phone face down. 10 minutes without production talk, she said. I lifted one eyebrow. She added, "We can discuss weather, soup, or Felix's campaign against synthetic lining." I tapped once for Felix and let the emergency become an evening. Miriam drew Felix as a knight fighting polyester. Her horse was a rolling garment rack. I laughed without sound until my eyes watered. Then the laughter ended, and the quiet stayed comfortable. That startled me more. My former partner had treated silence as evidence that something was wrong and filled it with questions until I performed reassurance. Miriam dipped bread into soup and allowed the room to remain unalarmed. I wrote, "Someone once loved my public voice and disliked nearly everything I asked for quietly." Miriam's humour left her face without making it cold. I explained in fragments. The praise after shows, the impatience when I needed rest, the way private sadness became inconvenient unless I made it eloquent. "So you learn to perform even at home," Miriam said. I tapped once. The truth looked small on the table and enormous inside me. Miriam did not touch me. She asked, "Do you want comfort, witness, or a change of subject?" I tapped 3 times, then wrote, "Witness." She nodded. I told her that applause had become proof I deserved patience, and losing my voice felt like losing the receipt. Miriam read every line. "Applause can tell you a room was moved," she said. "It cannot tell you whether you were loved." The next morning, I regretted honesty before breakfast. Miriam met me on the roof with tea and no altered softness. She asked whether the costume pocket still caught at the seam. That practical question steadied me. I typed, "Thank you for not turning me into a fragile object." She replied, "You are a complicated object with excellent balance." I smiled. Then she added, "And you get to set the handling instructions." Before I tell you how Miriam answered my next question, if quiet stories about women choosing honesty over spectacle feel like your kind of place, subscribe and stay close. I asked her why she checked consent around every artistic change. Miriam looked across the roofs. Because I once confused decisiveness with trust, she said. The humour left her voice. I sat beside her without reaching for the ribbon. Miriam told me about a production she had preserved years earlier. The design was precise. The cues were beautiful. The cast had stopped telling her when they were confused, because every question became another correction. She pushed through opening, earned praise, and discovered afterward that no one trusted her enough to celebrate. Control is fear wearing a headset, she said. I was very afraid and very well organised. I asked whether she feared doing that to me. She nodded. Especially because you cannot argue out loud right now. I held out the ribbon, one end in each hand. Then I waited. Miriam asked, "May I?" I nodded. She took the far end. We sat connected by faded silk and open air, neither pulling. The motif had changed again. It was not a mark or signal. It was a shared line with slack in it. Back downstairs, I led a trust exercise for the ensemble. Each person had to signal confusion before continuing. Miriam joined instead of observing. When she missed a cue, she used the lost place circle immediately. No apology, no joke, just information. The room relaxed. I saw how leadership could become visible humility, rather than authority disguised as certainty. Dana caught my eye and gave one approving nod. Our argument duet changed after the rooftop. I stopped pushing through Miriam's resistance. I let the distance stay visible. When she offered her hand, I did not take it until she turned her palm upward. The scene became less about persuasion and more about permission. Miriam whispered, "That is the story." I wanted to answer aloud. Instead, I placed my hand in hers for one counted breath and released. The first full run lasted 91 minutes, 7 shorter than the original. It was not smooth. An offstage transition came late, a cube scraped, and I lost my ribbon pocket once. But the story held. Dana's notes filled 4 pages instead of 9. Miriam asked the ensemble one question. Where did you stop trusting the piece? The answers were specific, which meant people trusted her enough to give them. I stayed on stage after everyone left. The ribbon curved from centre to the downstage corner like a question. Miriam did not come closer. She called, "Do you need notes or company?" I held up 2 fingers for hold, then pointed to the seat beside me. She crossed the auditorium slowly and sat at arm's length. The choice to invite her felt more intimate than accidental touch. I typed, "I am afraid the new version will succeed and prove the old Elena unnecessary." Miriam read it, then asked, "Do you miss the old staging, or the certainty it gave you?" I hated the question enough to know it was useful. I wrote, "The certainty." She nodded. Then we should not rebuild a worse scene to protect a familiar fear. Her honesty did not comfort me. It accompanied me. Miriam tied the ribbon loosely around the stage rail so the cleaners would not sweep it away. "Nothing permanent," she said. "Just held until tomorrow." The words landed in more than one place. My guest contract ended after opening. Her authority over the production ended with it, but my touring schedule would still exist. I typed, "Tomorrow is enough." She looked at me, careful and warm. "Yes," she said, "it is." We rebuilt the final scene from the safety route outward. Dana marked every clear zone. Miriam removed 2 hanging panels and lowered the remaining reveal. I designed a movement phrase that could expand or contract depending on the available space. The ribbon would show the ensemble where to enter without making the cue look mechanical. For the first time, the failure version was not a lesser copy. It had its own grammar. I gave Miriam 3 endings: narrow, medium, and full. The narrow version needed only 6 feet of clear floor. The full version used the rising panels and the whole ensemble. She chose none. "Teach all 3, she said. "Then the stage can tell us what it can safely hold." I stared at her. She lifted one shoulder. "Sets are just very large collaborators with poor communication skills." I taught the scalable ending in the rehearsal room. Each gesture had a small, medium, and full version. The ensemble learned to read my ribbon hand, then adjust without breaking character. Dana randomized the calls: narrow, full, medium. We stumbled, reset, and learned. By the 8th run, the group moved like people listening rather than people obeying. My professional skill was not surviving without speech, it was teaching attention. Miriam tested the system by calling the wrong size late. Instead of covering the mistake, she used the lost place circle. I redirected the ensemble with one sweep. Dana stopped us afterward. That worked because the error became shared information, she said. Miriam accepted the note without defending herself. I remembered her rooftop confession and saw the labor inside her change. Trust was not her personality, it was her practice. My clinic re-evaluation brought cautious good news. The swelling was improving. I could begin limited, gentle voice use only after the recommended rest period, stopping at discomfort and avoiding performance demands. I showed Miriam the instructions. She read every line. "We keep the adaptation," she said, "unless you want to test a few transitions later. No heroics." I typed, "You make heroics sound like poor scheduling. Usually they are." I asked whether the grant administrators expected the original script. Miriam explained that the grant required a public reopening performance and documentation of the theatre's restored operations, not artistic sameness. She had already prepared an accessibility note describing the revised staging without presenting my condition as promotional tragedy. I read the draft. It named choices, safety, and audience access. It did not name my private medical details. I tapped once, grateful. Felix insisted on a costume run under real sightlines. The hidden pocket worked from the front, but bulged from the balcony angle. He moved it 2 inches toward my hip. Miriam watched from the back row and called, "Less visible, more reachable." Felix answered, "That is also my tailoring philosophy and my dating history." I nearly voiced a laugh, caught myself, and pressed my lips together. Miriam looked away to hide hers. The finished costume let me kneel, turn, and breathe without resistance. Felix tied the blue ribbon loosely around my wrist, then made me remove it myself. "The prop is yours to choose," he said. I tucked it into the pocket. In the mirror, I looked less like the celebrated touring actress who had arrived, and more like a woman preparing to work. The difference was not a loss. Costume changed the rhythm. The coral skirt caught the air, so I shortened one turn and widened the final offer. Miriam shifted a deep blue sidelight to catch the ribbon without washing my face. We worked without speaking for nearly 10 minutes, passing cues through posture and small nods. When the sequence landed, she raised 2 fingers. I centered. She lowered them. "Continue." Our private signal had become fluent. We ran all 3 endings in costume. Narrow looked intimate, medium looked communal, full looked spectacular, and, to my surprise, slightly less truthful. The rising panels pulled attention away from the human choice at center. Dana said nothing until Miriam asked. "The machine gets applause before Elena finishes the thought," she said. Miriam stared at the rig. I could see professional pride arguing with the production in her face. Miriam had designed the reveal herself during the theatre restoration. Removing it would mean discarding months of careful work. Dana reminded her that the full cue remained safe after repair, but safety was not the only question. Miriam sat in 3 different seats and watched the medium ending again. Then she said, "The effect stays available, not mandatory." She chose flexibility over authorship, and the room quietly changed around that choice. I met Miriam at centre after the note session. I typed, "That cost you." She read it and nodded. Good design serves the event. It does not demand gratitude for existing. I wanted to tell her she was beautiful when she released control, That seemed both true and professionally catastrophic. Instead, I showed her the medium ending again. She watched with her arms folded and a softness she could not quite organize away. At the cafe, we reviewed the remaining hours. One spacing rehearsal, one technical run, one dress rehearsal, then opening. The schedule looked impossible until Miriam crossed out every note that served polish rather than coherence. "We do not need flawless," she said. "We need safe, legible, and alive." I wrote, "and honest." She met my eyes. "Especially honest." Neither of us mentioned the conversation waiting beyond my contract. Miriam showed me the contract end time in writing, midnight after opening, after the closing report and equipment sign-off. "Until then, I am your director," she said. "After that, I would like to ask whether you want dinner with me when neither of us is solving a production. You can answer now, later, or never." My heart performed an unsafe cue. I wrote, "Ask after midnight." Her smile was quiet and unmistakable. The spacing rehearsal began with Dana's safety drill. She triggered false stops, missing places, and blocked paths. No one complained. The gesture language had become part of the production rather than an accommodation attached to me. When an ensemble member lost a transition, I redirected with a circle and open palm. The scene recovered without embarrassment. Miriam watched from the wall, letting my teaching lead the room. Miriam asked me to teach her the recovery phrase, in case she needed to demonstrate it later. I broke it into weight shift, gaze, open hand, return. She overthought the first turn. I tapped twice. "No." She tried again with less intention and more listening. "Better." "You enjoy correcting directors," she said. I nodded vigorously. "Good. I am told it builds character, mostly mine." Before adjusting her elbow, I pointed and waited. Miriam said, "Yes." I touched her sleeve, moved the joint an inch, and stepped back. The contact was brief, consented, and somehow more charged than the handclasp in the scene. She repeated the phrase perfectly. I gave her the clear cue. She bowed. We had become very disciplined women standing in a room full of combustible inches. Technical rehearsal began at dusk. Miriam changed into her navy jumpsuit so the crew could identify her in low light. The theatre shifted from workplace to vessel. Gold footlights warmed the cream panels, blue accents deepened behind them. Dana called the opening sequence. I entered on the ribbon, not on a line. The absence no longer announced injury, it announced attention. I felt the audience shape space waiting for us. On the third cue, one panel rose half a second late. Dana stopped the sequence. I cleared the marked zone. Miriam cut the light and inspected the line. The mechanism was safe, but the timing sensor had shifted. She reset it, then asked whether I wanted to continue. I nodded. No one praised my bravery. No one needed bravery. We had a system, and the system made room for ordinary caution. While Miriam worked, I rehearsed the narrow ending alone. No panels, no ensemble, just ribbon, body, and light. The simplicity held. When she climbed down, she watched once from the wing. "It does not need the reveal," she said. I heard grief inside the sentence, but no resentment. I raised 2 fingers toward her. "Center, breathe, choose." She answered with the same signal. We reviewed the run from the auditorium. Dana listed 3 safety notes, Miriam listed 4 clarity notes, and I wrote 1 sentence. I no longer know what success means. Miriam asked me to define failure instead. I wrote, hurting myself, confusing the audience, pretending the adaptation is temporary when it is stronger. Dana nodded. "Good," she said. "Those are things we can test. Feelings are allowed, but they are terrible cue sheets." Miriam asked whether I still wanted to open. I typed, "I want to know whether wanting it is pride or choice." She sat 1 row below me so I would not have to look up. "Pride is not disqualifying," she said. "It becomes dangerous when it refuses evidence." I thought of my painless morning hum, the doctor's limits, the coherent, silent scenes, and the fear still scratching at me. I wrote, "Continue to dress." The next morning, I followed the clinic's gentle voice use plan on the roof. One soft hum, a few easy vowels, no projection, no pain. My sound returned thin and ordinary, nothing like the stage voice people praised. Miriam stayed far enough away not to turn the exercise into an audition. When I finished, she asked only, "Any discomfort?" I shook my head. Then I cried, quietly and without performance. Miriam offered a handkerchief and waited for permission before sitting beside me. I wrote, "I thought hearing myself would make me feel restored. It doesn't." She read it. "Maybe restored is the wrong job," she said. "You are not a damaged set piece." I laughed soundlessly through tears. She added, "Also, I refuse to compare you to scenery unless the scenery is unusually opinionated." The grief loosened enough for air. I asked whether she wanted my voice back for the production. Miriam answered carefully, "I want your health. Artistically, I want the version we have built. Personally, I want to hear whatever voice you choose to use with me, including none." The sentence settled without asking for repayment. I folded the ribbon into a small square. For years, quiet had felt like failure. Beside her, it began to feel like a room with windows. Dress rehearsal began with Felix threatening anyone who touched the coral costume while holding coffee. He checked my collar twice and the ribbon pocket 3 times. In the mirror, I practiced one medically approved spoken transition at conversational volume. It emerged rough but painless. We kept it out of the show. The choice mattered. My voice had returned enough to prove that silence was no longer forced, and we still chose the adaptation. Miriam came to collect me but stayed at the doorway until Felix finished. She asked whether I wanted the spoken transition restored. I shook my head and said softly, "No." The single word rasped but held. Miriam's expression changed, not with relief that I could speak, but with attention to what I had chosen. "No, it is," she said. Felix pretended to inspect a seam while smiling into the fabric. The dress run opened cleanly. Dana's cues landed. The offstage transitions framed the action without stealing it. I entered on the blue ribbon, crossed the first silence, and felt the story meet me instead of waiting for my old voice. Miriam watched from the wing, never mouthing counts or rescuing pauses. Her trust changed my timing. I let stillness last until it became invitation rather than absence. In the argument duet, my partner's offstage line arrived late. I held the gesture instead of filling the gap. The pause thickened, then clarified. When the line came, it felt earned. From the wing, Miriam raised 2 fingers. Center, breathe, choose. I answered by laying the ribbon across the floor. The audience would never know our signal, but it held the scene like invisible stitching. The full reveal worked in dress. Cream panels rose, gold light poured through, and the ensemble expanded into the largest movement phrase. It was beautiful. It was also, as Dana had warned, 1 beat too eager. The machine earned attention before my final offer completed. Miriam stopped the run and moved the cue 3 counts later. That small delay returned meaning to the people on stage. Spectacle became support instead of interruption. After dress, Dana declared the production safe enough to open if the final censor passed inspection. Miriam asked each department whether the show was coherent. No speeches. One by one, the adult volunteers answered yes, with conditions they could name. Felix wanted a spare ribbon preset. Dana wanted the bypass route kept clear. I wanted the narrow ending warmed in memory. Miriam wrote every condition down. When we were alone, Miriam asked me again, "Is it honest enough to open?" I looked at the ribbon, the altered costume, the stripped scenes, and the rig she no longer needed to defend. Then I said softly, "Yes." The word was rough and small. She did not celebrate my sound. She answered the meaning. Then we open. My body believed her before my fear did. Opening morning began with tea, toast, and a ban on notes. Miriam had already checked the rig with Dana. I had already completed my voice rest routine. We sat at our usual table with nothing to solve for 12 whole minutes. I said one quiet sentence because I wanted to, not because the show required it. You look tired, Miriam smiled. Romance is alive and well. I almost choked on tea. I whispered nothing. I used a gentle speaking voice within the clinic's limit. That was concern. Miriam lifted her mug. I received it as devastating praise. We agreed to return to silence for the rest of breakfast. The quiet no longer carried medical fear. It carried choice, attraction, and a contract deadline neither of us intended to blur. Her knee stayed on her side of the table. Mine stayed on mine. The theatre filled with practical opening day labour. Dana checked headset batteries. Miriam verified every lighting state. Felix placed a spare ribbon in the stage-left cabinet and announced that touching it with sticky hands was a moral failure. Volunteers swept aisles and set programs. No one treated the show as a rescue mission. It was a production, imperfect, prepared, and shared. That normalcy gave me more courage than any pep talk. Felix dressed me in the quiet rhythm we had developed. Collar, sleeve, pocket, ribbon. He asked if I wanted company before places. I shook my head. He squeezed my shoulder once, professionally, and left. Alone in the loft, I touched my throat. The voice was there, recovering. The role was there, changed. Neither cancelled the other. I breathed into my back and let my body become available to the story. Miriam found me on the roof 10 minutes before warm-up. She asked, "Director question or personal question?" I held up one finger for director. She asked whether I trusted the bypass ending. I nodded. Then I held up 2 fingers for personal. Our private signal transformed. She waited. I said gently, "Ask me after midnight." Her face softened. I remember. We returned downstairs without touching. The warm-up was silent by design. I led grounded breathing, joint release, and the full gesture vocabulary. The ensemble mirrored me. When I gave the lost place circle, everyone answered with open palms. No one was alone in confusion. Dana finished with both hands down. No debate, the safety cue. Then she pointed toward the stage. "Places!" My pulse climbed, but it had somewhere useful to go. 8 minutes before the house opened, the old counterweight jammed during its final test. One cream panel shuddered and stopped. Dana gave the flat palm cue. I cleared the zone before the metal finished groaning. Miriam cut power and inspected from the safe line. The guide assembly had twisted. No adjustment could make it trustworthy before curtain. The full scenic reveal was gone. Dana said, "The cue is stopped." No apology, no negotiation. Miriam looked once at the reveal she had designed, then crossed it out of the sequence. "Safety over spectacle," she said. She asked whether I could lead the narrow ending live. I answered with the clear gesture. Yes. The decision did not feel heroic. It felt like everything we had rehearsed becoming useful at once. With the reveal removed, we had 7 minutes to reset. I showed the ensemble the narrow ending through gesture. Dana confirmed the path. Miriam cut 2 overhead cues, widened the amber sidelight, and moved the final blue state downstage. She did not step into my choreography or tell me what emotion to play. Her expertise built a safe frame. Mine filled it. We looked at each other once. 2 fingers. Ready. The house opened 2 minutes late. No announcement was needed. The audience settled beneath the restored cream ceiling, unaware that the production had changed again while they found their seats. Dana checked me with a flat palm. I answered with one tap against my wrist. Miriam stood at the lighting desk, calm enough to borrow. The house lights faded. My fear did not disappear. It became information my body could carry. I entered not as the woman who had failed to speak that morning, but as the actress who had chosen another language. The first silence opened before me. Hundreds of people waited. My old instinct demanded speed. From the wing, Miriam raised 2 fingers. Center, breathe, choose. I let the room come closer without moving. The stillness held. Then I touched the invisible door, and the story began. The stripped second scene landed exactly as it had in rehearsal. I placed the imaginary key on the floor and turned toward the waiting town. A breath moved through the audience, collective and small. The offstage transition arrived cleanly. I did not miss speaking. I missed nothing in that moment. Dana's cue light flashed clear. I crossed into the next scene with the ribbon still folded in my pocket. In the argument duet, I offered my hand and waited for the unseen answer. The pause stretched longer than rehearsal. I trusted it. Miriam lowered the side light by a fraction, drawing the audience toward my face instead of filling the space. When the offstage refusal came, I stepped aside rather than back. The audience understood the difference. I heard it in the way no one shifted in their seat. From the stage, I could feel Dana and Miriam working without seeing them. Dana called the safe sequence. Miriam answered with light. Their choices never announced themselves, but the production breathed through them. A late prop entrance threatened one transition. Dana held. Miriam kept the state steady. I used the lost place circle, and the ensemble adjusted. The mistake became shared information, just as we had practiced. At the beginning of the final scene, I reached into the hidden pocket. The ribbon came free without a snag. I laid one end on the old center mark. The other remained in my hand. For an instant, I remembered it as tape that would not stick, a private signal, a line held with slack. Then I carried it downstage, showing the audience the path rather than commanding them to follow. I gave the narrow cue. The ensemble compressed the movement phrase without hesitation. No cream panels rose behind us. Nothing hid the mechanics of bodies choosing space together. I extended the ribbon. One performer crossed, then another. The audience watched the human decisions because there was nowhere else to look. The failure version had become the clearest version. Dana's bypass plan no longer felt like compromise. It felt like craft. Miriam brought up the new final light. Brighter gold reached the ensemble while deep blue held the empty space where the scenic reveal would have been. She made absence visible without asking it to apologize. I felt her decision meet mine across the stage. She had removed her most impressive effect. I had released my most praised instrument. Neither of us vanished. The work became more honest around the space we left open. For the last movement, I wrapped the ribbon once around my palm, grounded my weight, and opened my free hand. The gesture meant welcome, boundary, and choice at once. I did not force it larger. The audience leaned toward the quiet. When I released the silk, it fell in a soft blue curve across the floor. The final image belonged to gravity, timing, and every person who had learned to listen. There was one full second after blackout when nobody moved. Then the applause arrived. Warm, uneven, human. I had expected triumph or grief. What I felt was relief that the room had understood without requiring me to injure myself for proof. Dana called the curtain cue. Miriam stayed at her station. I bowed with the ensemble, not in front of them. The ribbon remained visible at center stage. Backstage, Felix handed me water and said, "Your eyebrows received excellent reviews." Dana checked my throat with a questioning gesture. I shook my head, no pain. Then I used the clear cue. Safe. The volunteers hugged one another, but no one crushed me into celebration. We had trained too well for that. Miriam remained in the auditorium, overseeing the audience exit and the damaged rig. Of course she did. After the house cleared, Dana documented the jam. The old counterweight guide had twisted under load. It would need professional repair before any future use. Miriam signed the stop order without hesitation. The grant performance still counted because the theatre had opened safely and completed the production. No miracle had saved us. Preparation, skill, and the willingness to remove a beloved effect had done the work. Miriam finally came down the aisle. "You were extraordinary," she said. I felt the old hunger reach for the praise. Then she added, "And you looked after the room." That mattered more. I answered in my gentle, limited voice, "So did you." We stood with all the unsaid things between us. Then Dana called Miriam back for the closing report, and professional time resumed. Felix helped me out of the costume and placed the ribbon on the cutting table. He asked whether the evening had changed my touring plans. I said softly, "Not yet." My voice sounded tired but comfortable. He nodded. "Good. Never make a life decision while wearing stage makeup or receiving applause." I promised nothing. In the mirror, my face looked bare, adult, and oddly peaceful. I changed into my blue blouse and joined the closing report. Dana confirmed the show, attendance, safety stop, and equipment lockout. I signed my performer notes. Miriam signed as artistic director. At 11:58, Dana looked at the wall clock, then at us, and became fascinated by a cable 20 feet away. The guest contract ended at midnight. No one rushed the final 2 minutes. At midnight, Miriam unclipped her lighting remote and set it on the desk. "Your contract is complete," she said. "The role remains yours for any agreed future performances, but I am not asking about that now." I appreciated the precision. She stepped back, leaving me room. "Elena, would you like to have dinner with me on a night when neither of us is responsible for a counterweight?" I said, "Yes." My voice was rough, quiet, and enough. Then I added, "I tour. I want to keep touring. I also want quiet days, and I will not perform being easy when I am tired." Miriam nodded. "I direct here. I am not leaving the theatre. I also will not make your availability a test of affection." The future did not shrink. It gained clear edges. Miriam said, "I have wanted to kiss you since the soup spoon tragedy, which is not my strongest sentence. May I kiss you now?" I laughed, a soft sound that did not hurt. "Yes," I said, "slowly, and please stay close afterward." She lifted one hand and waited again. I leaned into it. Her palm rested warm against my cheek, not steering, only present. Our first kiss was quiet, careful, and entirely ours. No audience, no cue, no contract underneath it. Miriam kissed me once, then drew back far enough to ask with her eyes. I nodded and kissed her again. The second kiss held more laughter. When we separated, she touched 2 fingers to her heart. "Center, breathe, choose." I answered the signal and realized I had chosen without abandoning any part of my life. We returned to the stage for the ribbon. I expected the silk to feel ceremonial. It felt like fabric, slightly dusty, warm from the lights, frayed at one edge. I loved that. Miriam asked whether it should go into the archive. I said, "Not yet." We coiled it together without pulling. Then we left through separate doors and met outside as 2 women going to find very late pie. The cafe kitchen was closed, but the owner had left 2 slices of peach pie for the opening crew. Miriam and I ate them at our usual table. Our knees touched once. Neither moved away. We talked about ordinary things, my next tour, her spring season, how badly she packed for travel, how many screwdrivers she considered reasonable. Attraction became more believable when it survived a discussion about laundry. I showed her my touring calendar. 3 cities over 10 weeks, then a month free. Miriam showed me the theatre's repertory schedule. We did not pretend distance would be charming. We discussed calls, visits, voice rest, and the right to say, "I have nothing polished to offer tonight." She wrote that sentence on a napkin and underlined it. We were not promising constant access. We were practicing honest availability. The following week, the production stayed in repertory. Miriam did not restore the scenic reveal after repair estimates arrived. Dana's safety report supported removal, and audience feedback consistently mentioned the clarity of the live ending. Felix celebrated by declaring the ribbon pocket a historic achievement. The adaptation remained because it was artistically stronger, not because my voice had failed to return. That distinction protected everyone from turning illness into mythology. Before I left for tour, we rehearsed the repertory cast in the narrow ending as the standard version. I taught the movement language. Miriam preserved the lighting frame. Dana kept the bypass cues because good systems survive success. My voice could handle conversation again, but I did not restore the removed speeches. The story no longer needed them. Neither did my pride. I left the theatre with work ahead, not a life surrendered. On departure morning, Miriam met me on the roof. She did not ask me to stay. I did not ask her to wait unchanged. We agreed on one visit during the tour, and one weekly call that could become a text if either of us was exhausted. Then she kissed me beside the basil, warm and unhurried. "Go do your work," she said. I smiled. "You too." 6 months later, I returned between tours to a theatre that no longer smelled like fresh plaster. The production was still running twice a month. My voice had recovered under professional guidance, though I paced it more intelligently now. Miriam met me in the aisle wearing her sage jacket and the expression she used when pretending not to be delighted. I dropped my satchel. She stopped pretending. We had also launched an accessible storytelling workshop for adults who used speech, sign, movement, communication devices, or any combination that served them. I taught physical narrative and gesture structure. Miriam taught adaptable space and honest visual focus. Dana taught cue systems that made confusion safe to admit. The workshop did not treat speech as the standard and everything else as substitution. It treated communication as design. Miriam handed me a brass key to the rehearsal room. The faded blue ribbon was tied through its ring in a neat, loose bow. Once it had marked where I should stand, then it had signaled when to breathe. Now it opened a room other people could shape for themselves. I turned the key in my palm. "Temporary?" I asked. Miriam smiled. "Renewable, with consent." Our relationship looked less like a grand ending than a well-designed schedule. I toured. Miriam directed. Some weeks we shared breakfast. Some weeks we shared a tired voice note and no resentment. We argued about cues, apologized without speeches, and kept room for work that mattered beyond us. Quiet stopped being the place where love disappeared. It became one of the places we met. On my first repertory return, I spoke one short transition at easy volume because the scene benefited from it. The rest remained physical. Miriam did not treat the sound as restoration or the silence as sacrifice. Dana called the narrow ending. I extended the ribbon, and the ensemble crossed by choice. From the wing, Miriam raised 2 fingers. Center, breathe, choose. I smiled before completing the final gesture. Love made room, and the room became a life. Would you have opened with the simpler ending, or waited for the spectacle to be repaired? Tell me in the comments, and subscribe to Ivy's GL Tales for more warm stories about women finding safety, second chances, and the courage to be known without performing every need.